So that's 2 days worth of eggs, and I don't know, definitely way off of my estimate of 2 eggs per day roughly for 10 chickens in the wintertime. Pretty much all year long they stayed at maybe 6 eggs in the really cold months, but ever since about February they're back to almost an egg a day for the chickens. They're all roughly 2 years old, so they're in prime time laying ages, but we're getting a ton of eggs right now off of those 10 chickens. And sorry about the pizza box here. Not a commercial for Papa John's. My oldest kid, actually my 2 oldest kids work for Papa John's now, so they get all this pizza at the end of their shift and they bring it home. So it's a pretty good gig if you got chickens, you got kids, get them a job at some kind of food store, and they can tap into all the waste resources, and you can turn that waste food into free eggs, free feed for your chickens.
Come over if you're gonna hog it. We'll have to switch sides. Too far!
The thing is, the wind is going this way, so it's gonna bring it.
Yeah.
You gotta pass.
The wind caught that, I think.
And have a game.
I'm gonna sit down.
You're cold?
Face is cold.
So here we are, January 4th.
Okay.
The only crazy people play pickleball.
That's the, I just laid an egg, check this out. We're all really proud of you. Hey, so we are doing another run of biochar. We do this every year. Biochar is like a 2,000 year soil fertility amendment. And basically when wood decomposes, somewhere around 85 to 90% of the carbon in the wood, when it decomposes naturally, will just get released to the atmosphere. The rest gets sequestered in the soil. However, when you run biochar, which is essentially a fire with a hot gas layer, and the gases get pushed up out of the wood and they combust in that hot gas layer. So you're reburning all of those hot gases, and then you use that heat to drive more gases out of the wood. Then when you're pretty much out of fuel, the gases that are entrained in the wood, and you start to turn into ash, that's the charcoal burning, and it's turning from charcoal into ash. That's when you know your batch is done. You quench it and you keep it in that charcoal state. And basically, the charcoal in the wood looks like this giant honeycomb structure for soil microbiology. Also, it's a bunch of empty carbon bonds that can bond tons of nutrients and stop them from washing away during heavy rainstorms. Also, because the microstructure of the biochar is very porous, almost small little like honeycomb hallways, then the capillary action of the water will actually kind of hold it onto the walls of the biochar. So biochar, when it's put into the soils, will actually hold a tremendous amount of water. A lot of the gardening issues that people have is from a lot of water and then not enough water. So you got a ton in the early season, you don't have much in the summer, you get a little bit more in the fall. As well, even the day-night cycle, at the peak height of the day, you're kind of burning away all the water in the soil. So plants see this sawtooth water profile. When you have biochar and a ton of organic matter as well in your soil, things that hold water, then the plants just see this kind of naturalized, moderated, smoother water cycle. So that's why we're making a bunch of biochar. We use our pruning cuts from a couple seasons ago. We usually like to dry out the wood 3 to 4 years, ideally. I mean, ideally you're drying it out like 10 years. If I get some sumac, for example, we have a lot of sumac that grows around us. If I pull out some super dry sumac that's like 10 years dead, that stuff is ideal for biochar because you're not burning away any water. Burning away the water is a ton of heat in the latent heat of vaporization phase. So you really want all that combusted gases pushed out of the wood to drive more heat to push the other gases out. You don't want to lose a bunch to having to vaporize water. So a really good biochar burn, we're getting a little bit of ash because I've been talking for a while now, but a really good biochar burn will have almost no exhaust gases visible. And usually if you have anything visible, it's usually, as long as you've got a hot gas layer, a really nice hot gas layer, it's usually water vapor that you're seeing. Right now, because we've got a little bit of charcoal turning to ash, we are seeing a little bit of smoke now. So what I do now is I stomp it all down, and what this does is it'll crush all the biochar up. It'll all fall to the bottom. That closes in any air gaps that are in the bottom. That way we don't get a lot of oxygen that can get into the fire, and because we don't have a lot of oxygen, now we're actually going to be in pyrolysis. It's the pyrolysis reaction that you really want to keep your char process in for as long as possible. So I'm going to stomp all that down. We'll add a little bit of more wood, and then we'll probably quench this fairly soon. We're going to move this into a new next level compost pile. We're going to be adding in some manure from the old, I'll actually show you. We're going to add in some of the leftover manure from last season. We're going to add in some biochar from last year that I've been inoculating here. So you can see this char here. This has basically just been sitting mixed with compost, eggshells, and manure for the last year. We're going to add this in, and that'll prime the microbiology in the next batch. And then we're going to clean out the chicken coop from the winter time. So we basically do a deep litter method. Now is about the time of the year that we clean that out. We can get all the nutrient and microbiology in the chicken manure in the run. We can mix that with biochar, mix it with other biochar and compost, and we'll also mix it with some leaf mold from leaf bags here. And this will be kind of our composting area, nice and close to the house, somewhere that I can get in there and I can turn it and keep it well oxygenated. And then we can also add some of the, human liquid gold into this stuff, that is a very worthwhile and worthy thing to do. So definitely make sure you're doing that as well. Any kind of nutrient waste you can put in here. Old coffee that you haven't eaten, coffee grinds is fine as well. You can put in old flour that's expired, you can throw that in there, mix it with some water, get some yeast going on in there. You know, lots of stuff, molasses, anything that you've got that's organic and probably nutrient dense, throw it in there. It'll inoculate the biochar, and then that will go into our garden for next year. So you'll probably also notice this little hose here. We've got a sump pump dropped into the artesian well over here, a little pond that I hand dug. And before I run this biochar batch, I pre-soak the whole area all around it with a ton of water. And that's just if something like that happens. When I was stomping some of that biochar, some coals jumped out. And if it's, you know, a fairly dry season, that can really just take off and spread. The twigs, for example, burn really hot, like 1200 to 1400 Fahrenheit. So you get a really hot twig, piece of coal jump out, that's really, really hot, and it can spread a fire real quick. It's kind of smoldering there. It's not going anywhere because the ground is just completely drenched. So make sure you do that as well, just for safety. They like to lay in this corner over here. Why are you guys laying over there? So basically our bedding is wood chips at the bottom, and then I mixed in some biochar in there and some leaves. So we've basically been adding leaves all the over the winter time, and I mean, this is the first time it's really been unfrozen in order to empty it out. But it adds a little bit of heat to the coop over the winter time as well, if you get a nice good carbon mixture in there to help break down some of the high nitrogen. So I mean, it looks a little ugly there, but what you can see kind of behind there is the leaf bags all around behind. We did that because this is downslope that way, and we wanted to make sure that any rainwater or snow melt that would have accumulated here and then run, we wanted to basically soak it. We don't want to lose that fertility, so we wanted to soak it. We've also got a whole bunch of, you know, older manure and charcoal here from our last next level compost. So you can see, look at some of this. So this is the stuff that we're building here. So you can see this is the stuff that we put onto our food forest and start our raised garden beds in. That's great, great stuff. Very fluffy, super nutrient dense, but also locked up inside a whole bunch of biochar and charcoal. That way it's not a ton of fertility, it's like a nice slow release of just a moderate amount of fertility. And I try to go roughly 10-20%, actually probably closer to 20% biochar. Try to go about that heavy on the biochar. But there are some Swedish experiments where they went as far as 75%, and they found that plant growth rate was kind of peaked in and around the 20% range, and then it slowly tapered off from there towards 75%. And once you got over 75% biochar, that's when it really fell off quick. So you kind of want to be around 20%. Got another bucket. So I'll mix that up later, and I also like to have the tarp on there because I don't want any of the nutrients to leach away. I can water it myself if I find it's too dry when I'm turning it. But all of this chicken manure, it's fairly fresh. It's just from this winter time, and because it gets so cold in the winter time, there's not a whole lot of decomposition that's happening. So it's really, once the temperatures start rising over the next couple months, that's when this pile is going to really fire off. And we've got charcoal mixed in there, manure, we've got leaves, wood chips. So we've got a real nice mix, and as soon as the temperature is appropriate, that thing's just going to take off. It's going to really heat up. I'll keep mixing it to turn it to get oxygen in there, and I'll keep making sure that it's got enough moisture in there, and that is going to be some incredible compost probably in about 2 months or so. So I think we're going to quench this now, and it's getting a little dark, so I'm kind of done. I'm done with this. I'm gonna go inside, have a nice tea, and end the day. So basically I have moved the sump pump all the way over to the pond over there, and I'll quench this now with some real nutrient rich pond water. And we've got koi in there, there's lots of fish poo and pee, we've got algae, we've got a ton of microbiology, and we'll quench it with that wonderful water. So when I say I quench it, I mean I fill this drum from empty to full with water, because I want all the heat out of here. This is how you should put out a campfire as well, right? You make a slurry. You don't just pour water on a fire and walk away. You make a slurry, you stir it around with a stick, and you get it soaked. For this, because this is doubling as inoculation as well, I get this absolutely soaked. I don't want this turning to ash overnight. So I'll keep filling this, and I'll be with you in just a sec. Okay, so now that this has kind of cooled down a bit, I know from doing this a bunch of times now that I know some of the bigger pieces, I know I didn't run it long enough for those to be fully done through. Now I want to show you a nice little trick that you can do to tell if your char is done. So when you take a piece of char and you crush it up, so first off it should be all black. And if this washes off with water, then you know you basically just have charcoal left and not a whole bunch of bio oils. So do you see how my hands are basically clean now? So now I know that there's not any carcinogen oils in my char. This is really important, especially if you're going to grow root crops with your charcoal. You should be able to wash off your fingers completely, and they should come clean. That way you know you're done. So you can see how full of water I fill this. This is what you want to see, a soup. And you'll be surprised how much water this can take, because it is basically mostly air in here. This is very porous stuff. It's just the skeleton of carbon bonds that's left over. So I've been filling this thing for so long, it almost feels longer than it would be to actually just fill it full of water. But this stuff just slurps it all up. And this is what it does in the soil. It'll just slurp it all up. So when I come back tomorrow, this will basically be dry, believe it or not. It won't be water, there won't be any wetness. It'll basically just be dry, and this will suck up all the water, and I put it in the compost pile over there, and it's going to basically put water inside the biochar into that. That is going to be fantastic for the soil microbiology. That is going to colonize and populate the little hotels that I'm making from my biochar. So if you enjoyed this one and you really like the biochar stuff, you like the composting stuff, I have a detailed composting guide. I've got biochar videos. You know what? I think I'll make a biochar playlist. So check out my biochar playlist. You can get all the information on biochar. You can see what kind of fertility that we add into our food forest here. I take my fertility very, very seriously here in the food forest. I want to create systems where the land just gets better and better without my future work. To do that, I've got to get fertility and carbon in the soil. So biochar is a carbon sequestration technique. Even if you're not doing it to actual sequester carbon for climate change reasons, do it for getting carbon in your soil, because that's where that carbon belongs. It belongs in your soil, where it's going to add fertility for thousands of years, long after you're gone. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Happy gardening.